I am John Miller, a retired soldier living in a small town in the American West where everything seems to retain the peacefulness of old days. My life is not a glamorous story of heroes, but a long string of diligence and sacrifice is spent most of my time at the construction site managing hard, tiring work. Though I don't make much money, I'm always proud of what I have built for my family, that day like every other. I woke up before dawn, preparing for a new work day. I poured myself a cup of black coffee, too strong and a bit burnt, because I had been distracted, but I didn't mind. My life has always been like that, simple and full of regular habits, coffee, work and evenings with family. Rebecca, my wife, had prepared breakfast for the whole family, but she seemed unhappy. A cold gust of wind passed, causing me to pull my jacket up higher and look toward the window. And then I suddenly realized that the atmosphere in the house today felt different. This vague feeling clung to me throughout the morning, even though everything seemed normal. Emily, my daughter, was studying at a big city university, but she still called me every night. Everything in the house was stable until the call came. The phone rang, breaking the morning silence. An unfamiliar number appeared on the screen. I picked up the phone, holding it as if I had already guessed what was coming. "Hello, Mr. Miller. I'm a nurse at Memorial Hospital. Your daughter, Emily, has been brought into the emergency room. Please come immediately." A terrible shock hit my heart. I didn't have time to ask any more questions, only able to say a short sentence. What happened to her? Why is she at the hospital? The nurse didn't answer my question directly, but only said, "We can't explain over the phone. Please come right away." I put the phone down on the table, my heart stopping for a second. I thought my peaceful life would never change, but now I knew everything had begun to unravel. I rushed out without having breakfast, only grabbing my thick jacket and jumping into my old pickup truck. The engine roared like a growl from the earth, and I sped off blindly, knowing only one thing: I had to get to the hospital as quickly as possible. I stood in front of the emergency room door, my eyes glued to the foggy glass of the room inside. Emily was lying in the hospital bed, her face no longer the image I had seen before. Large bruises covered her face, her right eye swollen, and blood still dotted her hospital gown. She gripped the thin blanket as if it were the last thing keeping her alive. Tears streamed down, her face filled with pain. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" I walked over and sat beside her bed, holding Emily's hand. She lifted her head, her eyes full of panic, and tears continued to fall. "Dad, Dad, Mum, Mum!" And Uncle David, she couldn't finish her sentence, her sobs making it unbearable for me. What happened? I pressed, my heart tightening. "Dad, I came home early from Sarah. I heard noises in Mum's room with Uncle David, and then they did things I can't believe." I screamed. "And then these men, they appeared, threw me down the stairs." Emily cried. My heart tightened. A rush of pain, regret, and anger flooded through me. Rebecca, my wife of 23 years, had betrayed me with David, my own brother, the man I had trusted. This was a wound I couldn't erase, and when I thought about what had happened to my daughter, nothing could calm me anymore. And those men, sweetheart, who were they? I continued. They were Uncle David's bodyguards. They're not ordinary people, Dad. They bad people. Emily's words snapped me into reality. My entire family was being threatened, and I couldn't stand idly by. Standing there in the hospital, looking into my daughter's eyes, I knew I couldn't let this betrayal go without consequences. This wasn't just an affair. No, this was betrayal, a calculation. David wasn't just my brother. He had pulled my wife into dangerous relationships, and now he had hurt my daughter. I couldn't forgive the people who had torn my family apart, As I left the hospital, my head was spinning, but one thing I knew for sure, no one was going to get away with what they had done when I left the hospital. My mind was heavy, each step feeling like walking on a path full of nails. The ride home from the wide hospital became an endless journey. I looked out the truck window, but my eyes couldn't stop on the familiar scenes passing by. All I thought about was Emily, my daughter. She was too young to have to endure all of this. On the way home, a light rain began to fall, making the atmosphere even heavier. I didn't know what to do next. The pieces of betrayal from my wife and my brother David were gradually becoming clear, from casual conversations during family meals to the business trips when my wife became distant, to the strange appearances of David whenever I was away. It was all too obvious when I got home. I didn't enter right away, but stood for a moment under the porch, waiting for the rain to stop. The rain seemed not only to cleanse the earth, but also to be the only way for me to cleanse the pain building up inside. After a few minutes, I walked into the house, silently, with only the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty house. Everything was the same, the familiar smell of dinner that my wife always prepared when I came home, the scent of candles and wood in the air, but nothing in this house felt like home anymore. I walked into the bedroom where Rebecca and I had once built a family where sweet memories had been woven, but now all that remained was coldness and betrayal. As I sat down by the bed, my hand unconsciously touched my watch, a gift Rebecca had given me on our 10th wedding anniversary. I remembered that day. I had promised myself that I would do anything to protect my family, but now I didn't know what to do anymore at that moment. My phone rang. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know who it was, Rebecca. An invisible anger began to rise within me, but I picked up the phone, trying to keep my voice calm. "John, where are you? I need you. I can't explain everything over the phone, but you have to trust me." Rebecca's voice cracked, as if she was trying to avoid the truth. "You don't need to explain anything, Rebecca. Everything is already clear," I interrupted. My voice is cold. "Assis, you don't understand. You have to hear me out. Don't do this." I laughed. "Betrayal," my voice colder than before. "No, you don't have anything left to explain. You and David have done something too terrible. Can you explain the wounds on my daughter's body, Rebecca? Can you explain why it was you and your brother who hurt our family in that moment?" The phone went silent. There was no more voice from Rebecca, only tension hanging in the air. "I know everything now, you and David. You've deceived me, deceived Emily." My voice was like a NKN cutting through, the calmness no longer composed. "John, I'm sorry." "Please don't do this," Rebecca finally began to cry, but I felt no sympathy. I hung up, not saying another word. In my mind, there was only one thought. This was not just betrayal, it was a well-calculated plan, and they had acted too recklessly. But this wasn't the time to falter. It was time for me to act. The next day, as the first light of dawn hit the house, I made my decision. I couldn't let them go unpunished. I needed to find out everything about David and his connections. I needed to know what they were doing and whether they had any other plans. I couldn't let this slide so easily. I went to the office meeting a few old friends in the security industry. One of them was Lucas, a longtime friend from the military. We had fought side by side in brutal battles, and I knew he would understand what I was facing. A single phone call, and Lucas was there. "What do you need, John?" Lucas asked, his voice calm, but I knew he was fully aware of the gravity of the situation. "I need all the information about David. I suspect he's not just an ordinary businessman. I need to know what he's doing, and if he has connections with any major criminal organizations." "Don't worry, I'll get started right away," Lucas replied, his gaze resolute. That night, I sat in the dimly lit room. Only the faint light from the desk lamp illuminating the documents I had gathered. I realized then that everything I thought I knew about my family had been completely turned upside down. David wasn't just a brother, he was an enemy. He had ties to criminal organizations, and I was afraid, not only for myself, but for the people I loved. The information Lucas provided made me even more stunned. David was connected to protection rackets, arms trafficking, and everything seemed to revolve around money laundering and illegal deals. Everything had been prepared long ago, and now I had to face the truth that my wife was also a part of his plan. With each document I turned over, my anger grew. Yes, I wouldn't let anyone get away. With these actions, David and Rebecca thought I wouldn't do anything, that I would be weak and forgive them, but they were wrong. The price they would pay would be steep. My heart boiled with hatred, but I knew I needed to stay calm and prepare carefully.
I couldn't let emotions take control. This would be a merciless battle, and I would be the one to win. Night had fallen, and the house was now only filled with darkness. Everything in this house was cloaked in loneliness and betrayal. I sat in the living room, clutching the phone, the fiery sensation in my heart, impossible to extinguish every word Rebecca had said. The apologies, the excuses were all meaningless. I couldn't go back anymore. The feeling wasn't that of a man betrayed in love. It was that
of a father enduring the pain for his daughter who had just witnessed a scene. He never wanted to see Emily. My daughter, a young girl with her whole future ahead of her, had to endure such terrible harm, and all I could do was stand by and feel powerless. But now that powerlessness had turned into a plan, David had made a huge mistake. Thinking he could get away with everything so easily, he didn't know that I was not a man easily deceived, and no matter how much money or connections he had, I would still get my revenge, but not with blind emotion. I would take revenge by acting intelligently.
I stood up, stepped outside, and took a deep breath in the cold air. Tonight I couldn't just sit still. A serious conversation was needed. I went back inside the house and called Lucas. Lucas, I need you to help me with something, I said, my voice firm. What?
Do you need tell me? Lucas responded immediately. I need you to help me gather more information about David's connections with underground organization. I also need to know who among his associates might be accessible to me. He paused for a moment before continuing. Be careful, these people are to be taken lightly. They might have connections with the police and government officials. Lucas was silent for a moment before replying. I understand, let me start right away. I hung up the phone and began making my plans. This wouldn't be a simple act of revenge. I didn't just want to cause pain for David and Rebecca without consequences. I needed to make them understand that no one could treat me or my family with disrespect without paying the price. The next day, I went to David's company. I pretended to be a potential client, interested in investing in one of the real estate projects he was running. I didn't know much about the field, but I could pretend to be a wealthy investor willing to pour money into projects. I didn't care much about. What I needed were connections, people who could help me understand David and his activities. Entering the building, I saw a few people dressed in expensive clothes walking briskly. It felt like I was stepping into
a foreign world, a world I had never belonged to, but I wasn't afraid at that moment. I wasn't John Miller, an ordinary working man. I was a man seeking revenge, and I wasn't going to let anyone stop me. David appeared, smiled, and shook my hand. Hello,
Miller. I hear you're interested in our project. We're always looking for reliable partners. I smiled politely, pretending to be pleasant. I've heard this project has great potential. I'd like to learn more. With each word, I tried to control my
Emotions. The more I spoke with David, the more my anger rose. He talked about his project contracts and suspicious relationships. But I didn't care about any of that. I just wanted to gather important information, something that would help me expose
His illegal activities. The next day I received a call from Lucas. John, I've got information for you. David's connections run deeper than we thought. He's not only linked to street gangs, but also to some powerful officials in the government. They've been collaborating to launder money and run illegal operations. I'll send you some documents. I read the documents Lucas sent over the phone. Each page I turned was like a slap in the face. David wasn't just a betrayer. He was a dangerous criminal, dragging my wife into illegal activities. But there was more. He had pulled people from politics and the police into this game. This wasn't just a family betrayal. It was a large-scale conspiracy, and I couldn't let it continue. I immediately called Mac, a police friend I'd known from my time in the military. Mac, I need your help. I need information on David Thorne and the people connected to him in the police force. I can't do this alone. What do you want me to help with? John, I can't assist you openly, but
I can look into a few things in the shadows, Mac replied. I need names, the people behind him, the ones protecting him. Mac took a deep breath before speaking. All right, I'll get it for you, but you need to be careful. These people are dangerous, and they
won't hesitate to kill if necessary. I thanked Mac, but in my heart I was ready to face everything. No more fear, no more hesitation. This was a fight I had to win. Every plan, every detail I was preparing was leading to one final confrontation. The confrontation with the man who had betrayed my family and caused my daughter so much pain. The closer I got to the day of revenge, the stronger I felt. David and Rebecca hadn't just betrayed me. They had tarnished my honor and my family's, and I would not let that go without consequence. I couldn't wait any longer. From the moment I decided to act, I had carefully prepared each step, not letting emotions control me. But as I got closer to David's house, a familiar feeling washed over for me. This was the moment. I had calculated, and no matter what happened, I wouldn't turn back. Now I sat in the car, hidden in the darkness, just a short distance from his house. From here I could hear music and laughter coming from inside. These sounds were like salt in the wound. For me, the tears of Emily, the pain I saw on my daughter's body, all of it lingered in my heart. I was no longer an ordinary man. I was a father, and today I would protect my family in the way I knew how. I took out my phone and called Lucas. Are you ready? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. All set. I've confirmed all the information about David's bodyguard. None of them can stop you, I guarantee it. I've also contacted Mac. We won't let you face any risks. Good, stay in touch, I replied, then hung up. I stepped out of the car, feeling the tension, as if I were stepping into an uncompromising battle. Everything inside me was turning as I approached the door of the house I once considered the home of my family. The door was unlocked, and as I stepped inside, David was sitting in the living room with a few friends, laughing and talking. But when he saw me walk in, his face changed dramatically. "John, what are you doing here?" David asked, trying to maintain composure, but I could see the worry in his eyes. "I'm here to talk," he answered. My expression, unchanged. The whole room went silent. The men sitting with David stared at me, but none of them dared to move. I walked toward David, and at that moment he no longer had the initial confidence he had. Rebecca stood nearby, and when she saw me, her eyes widened. In panic, "John, you have to hear me out," Rebecca started, her voice choked with emotion, as if fearing something. "You don't need to explain anything." "Rebecca," I responded, my voice cold. "Everything is already clear. You and David..."
You've betrayed me. You've
betrayed Emily. She fell silent, saying nothing more. He turned to look at David, who was still trying to maintain his calm, but I could see the fear slowly rising in his eyes. She might be a successful businessman in the eyes of many, but today he couldn't
escape what he had done, David. I know everything I said. My voice firm. The deals you've made and the schemes you've been plotting. I have enough evidence to make you pay for everything. David took a step back, his face tightening. He began to understand.
That he had no way out. John, you don't know what kind of connections I have. You can't do anything to me, David said, trying to keep his composure, but I could hear the tremor in his voice. I wouldn't let him continue. I had been patient long enough. Every word he spoke made me want to cut everything off. You may think you're untouchable, but today you'll see that no one is above the law. You'll pay for what you've done. I said, my eyes never leaving him. At this moment, the living room fell completely silent. Everyone in the room looked at each other, but no one dared to move. Rebecca stood, frozen, her eyes full of fear, but I no longer cared about her. All I wanted was to protect my family, and I wouldn't let anyone destroy it. Get out, you're no longer my wife. I turned and said to Rebecca, my voice full of coldness. She looked at me, her eyes filled with fear, but she didn't say anything. With heavy steps, she slowly retreated toward the door. Both she and David knew that what they had done had crossed the line. As I walked out without looking back, I knew that a chapter of my life had come to an end. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel satisfaction. The pain was still there, but I had done what I needed to do. I had protected my daughter. I had brought justice back to my family. As I drove home, the surrounding space seemed silent, but in my heart I felt a sense of release. No more regrets, no more fear. I was never the one to be betrayed. I am a father, a protector of my family, and I will always stand up for the people I love. The next day, the early light filtered through the window, but in this house everything seemed to have quieted down. No more laughter, no more hurry, conversations. The house now felt like an empty shell, the smell of arguments, betrayal and hatred lingering in the air. I sat there in the living room looking at the walls that once held so many family memories. Now all that remained was emptiness. What happened last night had changed everything. I hadn't just lost my wife, I had also lost my trust. In everything I had built, I reflected on everything, every moment, every glance from Rebecca, every word from David. All of it was shrouded in lies, but the feeling I have now is not one of failure. It's one of liberation. It feels like a bird that has been trapped in a cage for too long, and now it has been let out to fly free. I am no longer bound by lies or betrayal, but that feeling also hurt. More than anything else, loss is something hard to accept, but sometimes loss is the stepping stone for us to move forward stronger. Emily still hadn't fully recovered from the shock she had endured. She was staying with a friend during this time, and I didn't want to disturb her right now. I knew she needed time to heal from the pain, tore again, peace of mind. But as a father, I also knew that I couldn't let her bear this sorrow. Alone, I drove to Emily's friend's house where she was resting. The heavy feeling in my chest grew as I thought about facing my daughter. I didn't want to hurt her anymore, but I knew I couldn't keep everything quiet. She deserved to know the truth. And most importantly, she needed to understand that I would always be there for her. When I walked into Emily's friend's house, I saw her sitting on the couch, silent, her eyes still swollen from crying. She turned to look at me, and for just a second, I saw the pain in her eyes. "Dad, you're here?" Emily asked, her voice tired as if she had been crying all night. I sat down beside her. gently, holding her hand. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. I know what you've been through is really hard, and I regret not realizing."
Sooner what was happening. But I want you to know that I will always protect you. Emily didn't respond right away. She just sat silently trying to understand what I was saying. I could feel the hurt in her eyes, and I couldn't help but blame myself.
For letting things get this bad, but I knew I couldn't change the past. I could only move forward and protect my daughter. "Dad, Mom. Mom's not who I thought she was," Emily whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't believe she did this." Toyu Emily's words struck deep into my heart. I couldn't deny that I had loved Rebecca very much, but I also understood that love couldn't cover up the truth. And the truth was that Rebecca had betrayed the entire family, leaving an irreparable wound. "You're not wrong. But I want you to understand that no matter what happens, I will always be the one by your side," I said, my voice firm. "I will always protect you, sweetheart. Anyone who harms you, I won't let them get away with." Emily looked at me for a long while, then finally nodded. Softly, though she was still in pain, I knew she had begun to understand something important. David and Rebecca couldn't hurt our family. Any more that evening, I sat in the quiet house looking out the window. I no longer felt pain, although there were still wounds in my heart that couldn't be healed. I knew that things would never be the same, but I also knew that I had done the right thing. What I had done wasn't for revenge. It was to protect the most important thing in my life, my family. The night breeze blew through the window, bringing with it a strange sense of peace. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. No more fear. No more haunting thoughts of the past. Everything would be all right. I would do whatever it took to help my family get through this challenge and rebuild our lives. The next day I decided to meet with Mac. He was the only friend I could trust. At this moment, he had helped me uncover David's connections, and now I needed to talk to him again. I wanted to make sure that every connection, every plot involving David would be exposed. He couldn't escape from what he had done. When I met with Mac, he already had new information. The investigation results showed that David was not just the betrayer of my family, but also involved in major criminal activities. The organizations he was linked with had significant influence in society, but now he had no place to hide. "John, though I have information on his bodyguards, these guys have criminal backgrounds, and they can't keep protecting him anymore. Everything will be handled," Max said, his eyes serious. I nodded, feeling no more doubt. I knew my life had changed, but at least I could ensure that the people who betrayed me would pay. This would end here. David and Rebecca would no longer harm my family that day. I sat in Ma's office staring at the documents on Vetable, the information I had received about David and his illegal activities. Each page was like a punch to my conscience. David was not just a deceiver, he was a monster who had teamed up with major criminal organizations, laundering money, trafficking weapons, and possibly even involved in murders. A feeling of disgust rose inside me as I thought about how he had betrayed my family in a way I couldn't imagine. With every new discovery, I felt my anger building, but I also knew that this had to end. David had to pay, not just for what he had done to me and my family, but for the crimes he'd committed against society. Mac looked at me, his concern evident. "On his face, John, I don't want you to face this alone. The people David is connected to are extremely dangerous. You're not just facing a betrayer, but an entire criminal empire." I was silent for a moment, then answered, my voice firmer than ever.
If they
want to play with me, they better be prepared for the consequences.
I've lost everything that mattered to me already. I won't stop until they have no powers left. Mac nodded clearly, not fully agreeing with me, but understanding that I was too determined to turn back. He stood up, pulled a USB drive from the drawer, and handed it to me. This is everything I found about David and his connections. We need to act fast. We can't let him react. I took the USB, thanked Mac, and left his office. The darkness of the night couldn't hide the resolve in my heart. With each step
closer to my goal, I felt like the unbearable things that had been weighing on me for so long were beginning to subside. I had to do what I needed to do to protect my family, and no one would stop me that evening when I got home. I plugged the USB into my computer and looked through the information Mac had gathered. David truly was a criminal mastermind. His connections to international crime syndicates were no simple matter. Ledgers, records, and encrypted emails confirmed that he not only ran illegal activities, but had also pulled in government officials, even people within the police force, into his operation. At the same time, I realized that Rebecca wasn't just a family. She had participated in legal financial transactions with David. She had been laundering money, transferring funds through offshore accounts, aiding his plans. I felt a surge of rage rising within me. I couldn't let them get away with everything. A phone call startled me. It was from Emily, Dad. Mom called me. Emily's voice trembled, barely able to speak. Did you talk to her? I asked, my anxiety making it hard to stay calm. I don't know what to do. Dad, she says, it's all a misunderstanding and she wants to meet me. I can't face her. Dad, I don't understand how she could do this to us. Emily sobbed. My heart shattered hearing my daughter cry. I understood the pain she was going through. How could a child face betrayal from the person she loved most, the one who was supposed to protect her? I gritted my teeth,
struggling to keep my voice steady. Don't worry, sweetheart. I'll take care of everything. You just need to rest, and I'll always be here for you. But deep down, I knew there would be a final confrontation. Rebecca had done unforgivable things, and I couldn't.
Leather continued destroying our family. She had not only betrayed me, but also harmed my daughter in a way that couldn't be accepted. The feeling I had now was one of inevitability. Everything was coming to a head, and whether it meant sacrificing everything, I wouldn't let Rebecca and David keep running unchecked. I took out my phone and called Lucas, the only friend I trusted right now. Lucas, I need you to help me set up a meeting with people who have information on David. Everything ends in the next few days. John, you need to be careful. They won't let you off easily. People like David never just stand by. I'm ready to face it all. I replied, my voice full of resolve at this moment. I wasn't an ordinary man anymore. I was a father fighting to protect my family, and I wouldn't stop until everything was back in its place. Every second that passed, I felt an urgency and resolve in every decision I made. Never before had I seen the path ahead so clearly. Tomorrow would be the day I couldn't turn back. It would all end, either me or them. The sun set behind the skyscrapers, casting long shadows like slowly forming nightmares. With each passing minute, I felt like I was getting closer to an inevitable confrontation. The intense emotions within
me could no longer be extinguished. I wasn't just fighting for Rebecca and David's betrayal, but for something deeper. I was fighting to protect the values I had built my whole life on, to restore justice for my daughter. That night, I sat in my office.
The weak light from the desk lamp illuminating the documents I had gathered, the evidence of David's illegal connections was gradually being uncovered. Along with Mac and Lucas, I'd gathered enough information to expose what he and Rebecca had done, but I knew this confrontation wouldn't just be about presenting evidence in court. David and his accomplice were not easy targets. They had lived in the shadows for too long. And now, as everything started to crumble, I was sure they wouldn't go down without a fight. Just as I was about to leave the room, the phone rang again. It was an unfamiliar number. John, the voice on the phone, started. "Elmi, this is Riley, one of David's men. We need a talk." I narrowed my eyes, unsure whether he was trying to deceive me or genuinely wanted to negotiate, but I knew once I was in this game, there was no turning back. "I have nothing to say to you. Be prepared for what's coming," I replied, trying to keep calm. "We know everything you're doing, John. Don't think you can win easily. If you want to continue, I suggest we meet. Let's end this easily." I wasn't unfamiliar with darker situations. I had been a soldier through countless battles, but this time was different. This was a battle to protect my family, and
I wouldn't let anyone harm the people I love. You can meet me, but don't expect any negotiations today. Everything ends.
I said, then hung up the phone. The next day I went to the meeting spot that Riley had specified, a small cafe located in a quiet suburban area where not many people passed by. The morning air was still heavy, but my heart was full of determination. I didn't just want to face David, I wanted him to pay for everything he had done. Riley was already there. Early, sitting at a table in the corner, he saw me walk in and stood up, his eyes full of challenge. "John, you shouldn't make everything so tense. I can help you, but it will come at a price," Riley said, his voice even but full of implication. He sat down across from him, not replying immediately. My eyes locked with his with no hesitation. "I don't need your help. I have everything I need to defeat you," I replied coldly. A long moment passed with no words spoken. Riley seemed to realize I wouldn't be easily swayed. Finally, he stood up and said with a sharp tone, "Fine, then there's nothing more to say, but remember, John, the price for this won't be cheap." He left before I could say anything else. I was left sitting in the dark, my heart heavy. I knew this battle wasn't over. Everything had only just begun. A few hours later, I received a call from Mac. He told me that he had discovered a major weakness of David's, a loophole in his transactions, something that could bring down his entire criminal empire in an instant. "John, we can make David pay immediately, but you have to act fast." Without further hesitation, I contacted Lucas and we began planning. For the final strike, this would be a no-mercy attack, no room for weakness that night. As darkness covered the city, I and my team were ready. I had all the evidence, and we were prepared to bring David into the light. The witnesses were ready, and an important meeting of the criminals was taking place. This was our one chance to dismantle his entire criminal network. We arrived on time, silently entering the area where the meeting was happening. The team moved professionally, without a sound, without drawing.
Attention! Everything had to go perfectly. We couldn't afford a second chance. When we entered the meeting room, everyone there was startled. David stood up, his face pale. He realized he had been trapped. I didn't say anything. I just stood there as steady as a rock. "Today is the day everything ends," I said, my eyes locked on him. "David, you've hurt not just me, but my family, and now it's time for you to pay." He no longer maintained his calm. David tried to retreat to his accomplice, but they were all surrounded.
Quick takeover followed. His men had no way out, and David was escorted out helpless, leaving behind his betrayal, greed, and guilt. When it was all over, he stood in the empty room, exhaling deeply. The sense of justice didn't come immediately, but I knew I had done the right thing. There was nothing easy about facing the darkness in life, but I had protected my family. Rebecca did not appear during the confrontation, but I knew there would be consequences. She would have to face what she had done. I looked out the window where the light of the city faded into the night. My life might never return to what it was before. but at least now I could protect. What mattered most, the following days felt endless. The entire city seemed to have changed, a false calm enveloping everything. However, in my heart, nothing was the same. David had been arrested, and his criminal career had collapsed, but the truth was, I didn't feel relief for freedom. All that I had done, every decision, every plan had led to a result that I still couldn't find peace in. I sat in the living room looking at old family photos, remembering the time when Rebecca and I were happy, when Emily was still an innocent girl, untouched by betrayal. I asked myself, could I ever find peace? In my heart again, could I forgive and move on? Or had it already been too late? The door to the room pinged, and Emily walked in her eyes, still showing signs of the wounds from the past. But today I could see that she was a little stronger. The emotional scars couldn't heal instantly, but at least she had begun to regain some confidence. "Dad," Emily hesitated, her eyes looking at me with doubt. I feel like I've lost Mum already, but I can't forgive what she's done." Emily's words made me choke up. I had thought that I was the only one enduring this pain, but she had gone through all those shocks as well. I reached out and hugged my daughter, saying nothing more. No explanation was needed, just this hug, so she could feel that I would always be there. "You're not alone, Emily. No matter how hard things get, I will never let you face them alone. You'll see everything will be okay." Emily nodded, but I knew deep inside her there were still questions without answers, and I understood that no matter what I did, that there was no way to erase the pain we had both gone through. The next day, I received a call from Mac. His voice was serious. "John, I've got news. David's revealed some big names in his criminal organization. The people behind him aren't just a few henchmen. There could be some people in the government. They're trying to silence him, and now they're looking for ways to clean up everything that made me stop breathing." For a moment I had predicted that things wouldn't be so simple, but I hadn't realized that this confrontation was going to be bigger than I thought. David might have been arrested, but the people behind him were still free. They wouldn't give up this game easily, and I had to be prepared to face even greater challenges. "We can't let them continue like this. I need you to help me set up a meeting with Lucas. This all has to end this week." I said, my voice firm, that evening. Mac and I met Lucas at a quiet cafe. We didn't want to be followed, and all I needed was a quick but effective exchange. Lucas was the only person I could trust right now, and I knew that without him none of my plans could succeed. "John, you're right. This is no longer just about David. The people with power behind him are very dangerous." Lucas said, his voice filled with caution, "We have to act fast. If we don't want everything to spiral out of control, I know we won't let them hinder. Yes, everything will end within the next 3 days." I said, my gaze resolute. 3 days later, we were fully prepared, a clear strategy, undeniable evidence, and witnesses ready to testify. But this time, I wasn't just fighting for my family, I was fighting for justice, for everyone who had suffered at the hands of David and his accomplice. The final confrontation took place in an abandoned building where criminals used to meet. It was where David and his allies had planned their illegal activities, but today, everything was going to change. David and the men with him had no idea that we were ready when we walked in. All eyes turned to us. I walked up to David, not saying a word, just a cold, furious gaze. "Today will be your last day. Everything you've done will be exposed. No one can save you." Now, I said, each word cutting deep into David's heart. He could no longer sneer. Now all he could do was look at me, his eyes full of panic. His henchmen didn't dare move, their eyes full of fear. And in the end, when everything was over, I stood in the middle of a new life. While David and his accomplice were arrested, things might not be fully back to how they were, but at least I knew I had done the right thing. I had protected my family. I hadn't let betrayal and crime take away the things that mattered most. Rebecca hadn't appeared during this confrontation, and I didn't know whether she truly regretted what she had done. But what I knew was that Emily needed me more than ever. We would start over, no matter how difficult it might be, and from now on I would never let anyone, whether family or enemy, threaten my family again. Our new life had begun.